Coming up on How to Be a Journalist.
I wanted to work in the media. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anyone that worked in the media. I remember when I was in school, I'm a football fan. I've loved football from when I was a kid. And I remember saying to a friend of mine in secondary school, one day I'm going to work on Match of the Day. So now I might take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to make a piece. In news, you're making it in an hour, sometimes half an hour. If something's breaking, you've got to get in the edit suite, you've got to write a script, get the pictures, put it together like now. And so the ability to do that quickly, accurately is really, really key. We were just playing around with different acronyms, and then it was like, wait a minute, BCOMS, Black Collective and Media in Sport.
Welcome to How to Be a Journalist, a podcast by News Associates. I'm Plamedi Mbungu, and thank you very much for tuning in. I'm a recent university graduate, and I work at News Associates. I'm early in my career, and I need the wisdom from more experienced journalists. So to solve this problem, in every episode, I will dive into conversations with some of the most dedicated and talented journalists from all corners of our industry, asking questions about their careers, successes, and giving you a different view of the person behind the byline. Whether you're an aspiring journalist, a seasoned figure in the newsroom, or just interested in knowing what happens behind the scenes, you're in the right place. Today's guest is senior sports producer, founding member and chairperson of BCOMS, Drew Christie. And how could I forget, also founder of Christie Media, a man with a lot of different roles. And he specialized very much in sports content, whether that's directing, producing, script writing, the lot, and has covered a lot of the biggest events in sport, with Match of the Day, the World Cup, the Beijing Olympics, only being a few, with starts in local media, with the BBC, but slowly progress from there. But I think sometimes it is better to hear from the guests themselves. So welcome to the How to Be a Journalist podcast, Drew. How are you doing today?
I'm good. No, thank you. It's great to be here. Feeling good. The sun is shining. I'm in a good space. Bit tired at the moment, I'll be honest. A lot of work's been happening lately, but I'm feeling good today and it's great to be here.
Oh, like when the sun is shining in Twickenham right now, my morale, just the morale of the entire area just goes up a couple. Which is quite nice.
Yeah, definitely.
So as you said, it seems like it's a little bit of a busy time and we're heading into a summer of sport where a lot is going to be taking place. But over the last few weeks, there was a number of big events that you've played a big role in. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Where do I start? If I start kind of recently, my role now is a senior producer with specialism in sport, particularly as a producer, director, scriptwriter. I'm also working events as well. So recently we had something called the Football Blacklist, which is an event that highlights and celebrates black excellence in football beyond the field of play. So we're talking about things like coaches, managers, commercial leadership roles, C-suite, that kind of thing. So the Football Blacklist has been going on for 15 years. But I've been involved on the live event side for about the last 3 or 4. And we had our big celebration in London, at Westminster, QE2 Centre, 900 plus people in attendance. That was a couple of weeks ago. And my job there was to basically be responsible for all the content, video content, music, etc. ahead of time, but also on the night overseeing the live event itself. So the show, again, building the show order, script writing, and then on the night working with the technical team, lighting, sound, graphics, music, videos, et cetera, to make sure that the show went off really well. And, big event, lots of people, sponsored by the Premier League. Barclays also one of the sponsors this year. Some really high-profile people in attendance. And I'm proud to say, I'm not someone that really blows my own trumpet, but the feedback has been that it's possibly the best show ever in terms of the scale of the show, the ambition of the show, the slickness of the show. So yeah, that was something that was very involving. Obviously when people go to an award show, they see the night, and the night may last 2 or 3 hours, but it's been months that have gone into that in terms of the amount of thinking, planning, preparation, writing, content, but there's a lot. And so to be the person that's responsible for that takes a lot. So that was probably one of the big things I was doing. And also linked to that, I also delivered a film for the Premier League on their No Room for Racism campaign, featuring top boy Ashley Walters, South London's finest, as a South London boy myself. Peckham born just like him, so it was nice to work with him on that. And my involvement there was, again, script writing. In fact, it was more than that. It was ideation, development, script writing, directing the shoot on the day, directed Ashley on the day, producing the final film for the Premier League. It went out, I think, last week. Really great reception, really great numbers. Ashley Walters really happy with it. It was shared by Gary Lineker and others. Premier League, really happy. I'm really happy. So recently, and there's other things happening that I've even forgotten about. So recently it's been pretty busy, and it's one of those times where, I'm a freelancer. So, I work for myself off my own back. So work can be a roller coaster. It can be really, really busy at times. Yeah. It can be quiet other times. But it's always one of those things. I think everyone who's in this game, who's a freelancer, will often tell you that everything happens at the same time. So in an ideal world, you'd love a nice, steady flow of work. But it's often that you get 2, 3, 4, 5 things happening at once.
When you're working for yourself, so as a freelancer, as you said, and you're creating so many different pieces of content, so your creative output at this point is a ridiculous amount that spans loads of different mediums that journalism can take form. Do you have any advice on how to balance all of that? Because I guess there are a lot of people listening now that are maybe curious about getting into freelancing.
That's an interesting question. I think it's difficult because I do think it's a personality thing. I think it's also a life thing in terms of I might be quite lucky in the sense I don't have children. I'm not married yet. That may change soon, but that's another story. So there's a certain, not freedom, but if you have more responsibility, you might feel that you need a more steady income. So I understand that. But I think for me as a person, I've been doing this freelance off my own back for 10 years. So it's 2016 was when I began working for myself. So I'm kind of used to it now. And I've always been someone that's a self-starter. Like I'm quite disciplined in that sense. Like I work from home. I've got a desk in my living room. That's where all the magic happens. But I'm quite comfortable with that. Some people need to go into an office. Some people need a team around them. And I understand that. But I don't really need that. In fact, I work better by myself. Which is part of the reason why I've kind of chosen my work career to go like that. But I do understand that some other people may need the push, the inspiration, if you want to call it that, from others. I think I'm kind of lucky in that sense that I don't need that. But I think if you are going to go freelance or you're going to do your own thing, whether it's your own company, your own platform, whatever, it's not easy. It is difficult. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be peaks and troughs. There's going to be times when you look at your bank balance and you're panicking. But I would always say that the time when you feel like you're struggling is the time you have to keep going, because there have been certain times where I've been in positions where you think, is this right? Is this going to work? And it always works. So I think if you've got confidence in yourself, belief in yourself, and also you're putting the work in, you're doing good work, you're making those contacts, those connections, building your network, then you can make it work. So my advice would be to follow the pathway that is right for you at that time. And that sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but I genuinely believe that we all have a pathway. And if we listen to that voice inside us, whether it's in your head, it's in your gut, wherever you call it, in your heart, or however you feel it, if you follow that pathway, then things will work out.
When the topic of diversity in media comes up, or diversity in sport comes up, it does look like you are one of the first people that like the Premier League will go to, or if the Football Blacklist needs somebody to organise all the content, you're the person to go through. So how did you build a portfolio where you became that trusted person?
I mean, that's a lovely thing to say. I don't know if I'm that trusted person, but but I think it's a difficult one because, I started my career a long time ago. I've been in this game for a quarter of a century. Do you know what I mean? Which is kind of scary when I think about it. But I began my career out of uni. I wanted to work in the media. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anyone that worked in the media. I'm a football fan. I've loved football from when I was a kid. And I remember saying to a friend of mine in secondary school, one day I'm going to work on Match of the Day. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know what that entailed because I had no concept of how that show was made. And somehow I ended up working on Match of the Day. And I say somehow because there wasn't really a plan. I wish I could tell you that there was a plan. I wish I could tell you that I did this and that and t'other and it all worked out. I think luck has played a massive part in my career and my life. And I think it plays a part in everyone's career and life. But you have to be in the position mentally, emotionally, work-wise, to be ready to take advantage of the luck that drops for you.
Yeah, of course. I like that as well. And, okay, I know for a fact that I've got a little bit of learning to do because when you first said Machiavelli, my first thought went to Tupac. But let's talk BCOMS. Tell me about your role at BCOMS. Tell me everything about it.
So BCOMS was founded by Leon Mann. But I've been involved in BCOMS from the very beginning. So Leon and I worked together at BBC. We were working together at BBC Sport. It was actually BBC Sports News. That's where I met Leon. I remember him one day coming to me and saying he wanted to bring together black people in the industry just to connect. And at that time, BCOMS was very much, it wasn't called BCOMS, it didn't have a name. It was very much just about bringing together people of African and Caribbean descent who worked in the sports media just to come together and just know each other. Because literally, yes, there were a few of us at the BBC who knew each other, but there were people at ITV, there were people at Sky, some people in Fleet Street in the newspapers, and we didn't know each other. So literally, Leon's idea was to bring people together just to connect. And initially it was 8 to 10 of us that met first. And it was literally initially just a networking support group, therapy group, agony group, moan group. But that's how it started. And that was important for us. And then it kind of grew and expanded from there. And I was part of what was initially a steering group. So there was like 4 of us. So it was myself, Leon, Rodney Hines from The Voice. Yeah, so we kind of pushed it forward. So my claim to fame is I came up with the name BCOMS. We were just playing around with different acronyms, and then it was like, wait a minute, BCOM, Black Collective and Media in Sport, and it just kind of worked because it kind of was what we were. BCOMS, you could say it as a word, so that's kind of my claim to fame. But also as part of that, I was involved from the very beginning, so I started our first social media platforms on Twitter, as it was then, Facebook. I tried to build the first website, terrible, didn't get anywhere. Got no idea how to build a website. Didn't even get to a basic stage, it was terrible. But, we're doing these things, we're trying. And then, it's slowly built, more members. And Leon's always been amazing with his connections in the industry. Probably the most connected person I know in the world. He was connecting into senior leadership. So initially we had a meeting as a group with Andy Cairns, who was that time head of Sky Sports News. And again, that was really just trying to bring forward some of the issues around diversity in the sports media as we saw it. We had a similar one with Roger Mosey, who was at that time head of BBC Sport. Then when Barbara Slater took over BBC Sport, we had another one with her. And it kind of just grew and expanded from there. I then took a step back because another part of my journey is that for nearly 7 years, I lived and worked in the Middle East. So I was at BBC Sport. I was working on things like Match of the Day, Football Focus, RIP Football Focus, Beijing Olympics, etc. World Cups, Euros. And then my job was moving to Manchester. BBC Sport was moving to Manchester. I was part of that move initially, and then I changed my mind. And then suddenly a job came up in Abu Dhabi, and I went out there to produce Premier League football in the Middle East. And that's another juncture, which was the most amazing thing I've done personally and professionally. I still got a step back from BCOMS at that time for a few years. In that time, the D Word began, which is the only conference focused on diversity in the sports media. And then BCOMS started to expand because obviously our initial kind of focus was around African and Caribbean people in the media, in sports media. And then we kind of expanded to the breadth of diversity. So obviously with a focus on race and ethnicity, but not just that, whether it's disability, whether it's LGBT, basically trying to push forward to try to change and improve representation in sports media, because it's important that we have that, because I think sports media is such an important space. And I think it's not always understood how important it is, because I think sports is one of the few things that connects us as society, as community. It goes across race, class, gender, whatever. And I think particularly when it pertains to race, it also drives a lot of the debate and discussion and understanding of race in this country. And when you look at the fields of play in almost every sport, you see fantastic diversity. But if you look behind the scenes, particularly in media, but not just media, whether it's ownership, coaching, commercial, whatever it is, we don't see that same diversity. So it's really important that the people that are telling the stories, that are shaping the stories, that are reporting the stories, have an understanding, an affinity, a connection to the people that are performing on the pitch and on the field. So that's a really key thing for us as an organisation. So the D Word happens, that push forward, and then probably 2018 we began our masterclasses, which have been absolutely amazing. I think we've had 400 plus young people go through that programme. Started initially in London. Initially our partners there were the Mayor's office, so Sadiq Khan's office, which was amazing. Since then we've had partnerships with Meta, current partnership with Nike. We then launched our masterclasses in the North, in Manchester, partnering with BBC Sport, which is amazing. We've got a bursary here at News Associates, which is amazing. With Chelsea sponsoring that, so we've had, I think, 5 years. We're in our 5th year now. Absolutely amazing people coming through the programme, doing amazing things in the industry, so we're really proud of that. We've also got consultancies with ITV Sport, News UK, and look, we're not going to solve the issue by ourselves, but the amount of impact we've had over the years is amazing. And in reality, and I'm not just saying this because it's true, we are, I think, probably the main drivers of the change of diversity in sports media over the past 5 to 10 years.
What do you think are the biggest barriers to entry that makes broadcast a little bit more accepting of diversity than the newspapers? Just thought that was an intriguing line, actually.
Yeah, that's a good question, to be fair. And it's definitely an issue that's always been there. And even now in 2026, if you look at organizations, the media as a whole, and I think it's even more pronounced in print, is very much about who you know. And it's very much about somebody giving you the opportunity. And it's often, and I can say this as someone that went into the BBC at a junior level. I joined the BBC out of uni. I don't know how it happened. I applied for a job and I got it. That never happened to anyone else. Almost everyone else that I met knew somebody. So when I was young, I started working at the BBC at 23. My first job, it was actually my first full-time job. Previous to that, I'd worked in shops, So my first full-time job was at the BBC, and everyone I met who had joined a similar level, their mum had worked there, their dad had worked there, their uncle was there, their neighbour was there, and that's how they got in, So if you've got in print, particularly sports media, and if we're going back to when I began, we're going back to a different time. Now we're in 2026, and it's very, very different.
Yeah, of course. So now I want to segue back into 2001. You just came out of university, and as you said, you got a job at the BBC. Tell me a little bit more about the role in detail.
Well, I came out of uni. I wanted to work in the media, wanted to work in sports media, actually. That was my plan. And I sent my CV off thinking, everyone's going to hire me, man. I'm great, I've got my degree. I'm amazing. Sent my CV off to everyone, letters to all, publications, and zero response. So I'm sitting there after a while thinking, why does nobody want me? Do you know what I mean? So it can be quite disheartening in a way. And I was working in William Hill, betting shop, because that's what I did during uni. I was working there part-time. But my mum saw a job in the newspaper for the BBC. And she said, there's this job going, you should apply for it. And I was like, BBC aren't going to hire me. Do you know what I mean? Why would they hire me? Because my perception of the BBC is that it's a very white bourgeois organisation, and they're not going to hire me as a young black man from South East London. They're not going to do that. But anyway, basically, my mum kept pestering me and nagging me, so I applied just to shut her up, basically. And then I got an interview. There was a long process, but I got an interview, and I must have done quite well. So I never got that job. But they put me on what they called an also suitable list. So that means if there was another role at a similar level within 6 months, I would go straight to interview. And that's what happened. And they were opening up a new news service for Kent. So that was based in Tunbridge Wells. And it was a new television, like local news.
Yeah.
After the 6 o'clock news, 6:30, that was a new service for Kent. They were opening it up. And I got an interview. And I remember I was late for the interview, not my fault. Trains are messed up. And I thought, they're never going to hire me because I'm late. And I was about half an hour late. And I went into the interview. The interview lasted 5 minutes. And I thought, yeah. And I got the job. I still don't know how that happened, but I did. So I joined a brand new team. And it was quite interesting because although it was 25 years ago, it was cutting edge at that time because it was the first tapeless newsroom in the UK. So prior to that, every television newsroom used tape. And people used to edit on tape, literally cutting with scissors. But this was a server-based newsroom. And that's very normal now. But at that time, no one had ever done that before. I remember we had people coming from all over the BBC. We had Sky come in, ITN come in, everyone looking at, wow, this tapeless newsroom. And they've got all digital editing places, and this is amazing. And for me, because I was young and new, that's all I knew. But people who'd worked there for years in the industry, and confusing to them and weird. But it was a good place to learn. My initial job was, they called it a broadcast assistant. It's an entry-level position. My job was basically, at that time, mostly taking in and receiving feeds, as we call them. So you might have a story that you're trying to make about, I don't know, a new park that's opening somewhere in Kent, and maybe the library in London has got footage of the park, and literally we would book a line and send content backwards and forwards. Or when people come in and they'd shot a VT, my job was to take, because even though it was tapeless, it was still on tape. So they would give us tape, and then we would digitize the tape into the system, and that was my job. So it wasn't a very interesting job, but it was actually at the hub of the newsroom. But what it did is it gave me an overview of how things worked in a newsroom. And what's really good about the BBC is the training. So I learned how to edit. I learned, they taught me how to use cameras, microphones. I did go out on shoots. I did interviews. So even though my job day to day was, I wouldn't say boring, but it wasn't, an exciting role, I did have the opportunity to do different things. And just to learn things. And then after that, I was there for about 9 months. And then there was a training scheme. It was actually a journalism training scheme for BBC Sport. It was a bursary. So they paid for me to do a postgrad diploma, which is a little bit like an NCTJ, but not an NCTJ. And that was actually in conjunction with BBC Sport. So I got on that, I did that. And after that, I then went into, I became a journalist, a broadcast journalist after that. I worked in BBC News. I didn't move to London. I lived in London, but my role, I started working in, TV Centre, working on national news for the BBC. Then I went to development for a while, developing documentary programmes. Then I was at BBC London doing radio production, radio journalism. That was really cool. And then I started to work for BBC Sport about 2006, 2007, something like that. Again, like I say, from there, football focus, match of the day, rugby special, Beijing Olympics, Euros, darts, gymnastics, swimming, Wimbledon, everything.
How did that time at the very beginning of time at the BBC influence what you went on to do?
So I think my training as a journalist really helped me. So, I wouldn't describe myself as a journalist now. I would say I'm a producer, I'm a director, filmmaker, scriptwriter. But my background in journalism is key to the work that I do because it's journalism that taught me what a story is. It's journalism that taught me how to identify a story. It's journalism that taught me how to cut through the fluff of a story. What's the actual thing that people are interested in? What's the key thing about this? It's journalism that helped me write scripts, and when you're working in news, you've got to turn things around quick. So now I might take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to make a piece. In news, you're making it in an hour, sometimes half an hour. If something's breaking, you've got to get in the edit suite, you've got to write a script, get the pictures, put it together like now. And so the ability to do that quickly, accurately is really, really key. And if you can do that quick, then when you do get a day or a week, it's easy.
Skill of storytelling just seems to be one of the most underrated, most useful skills that, like, the last 2 months or so of the podcast, I'm interviewing you right now. I've had the UK director of Reporters Without Borders, also had Chief Revenue Officer of the WSL. But storytelling, even though all of you guys are working in journalism adjacent sort of roles right now, so not necessarily, working in breaking news anymore, that one common thread just seems to be storytelling. It's underrated skill.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you think about I'm going a bit deep now, but if you think about human development, human evolution, storytelling is key. It's how we know who we are and where we're from and, where we're going to go, and I think particularly coming from, a Caribbean background but African descent, storytelling is what we are and what we do.
Yeah, of course. So now let's talk about your time in the Middle East. Let's hear about more. Spent quite a bit of time out there.
Yeah. I mean, I was out there nearly 7 years. So, like I said, I was at the BBC. I wasn't even offered a job. I was in my office. It's a bit like this luck thing, right? I talked about earlier. This luck fortuna thing. I'm in the office. There's a few of us that aren't going to Manchester. I happen to be in the office that day. I've got my headphones on. I'm doing some editing. And then there's a woman that I work with, or we, in our team, is an office, small office. There's probably like 5 of us in there, 6 of us in there. And I wasn't even listening to her. And I realized, I took my headphones on. I thought, what's she saying? And she said, oh, there's a friend of mine that said there's a job going in Abu Dhabi. Would any of you lot be interested? They're looking for a new assistant producer because someone's leaving. And I was like, yeah, send me that email. I'll drop it over. Why not? I dropped my CV off. Thought I'd never hear anything back. And literally 4, 5, 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to Abu Dhabi. It was that quick. It wasn't a plan. I'd always wanted to work abroad, but in reality, I'd never actually tried to work abroad. But was the universe hearing my call? My main fear was the heat, because I don't like the heat. So, so my main thing was, is it really going to be that hot? And I thought it can't be that hot. I've been to the Caribbean before. It can't be that hot. But it really is that hot. It's mad. And honestly, I say this, and I'm not just saying this, it's the best thing I've ever done, personally, professionally. And it was a time of immense growth, like I say, both in my work life, but also even more than that, personally. I kind of quickly settled in work. I was producing, so at the time, Abu Dhabi Sports had the Premier League rights for the MENA region. So that's broadcasting to, 15 countries, wherever it is. And I was doing support programming. So I never worked on lives. And I used to we used to have a show called Inside the Premier League, which was a nightly Premier League news show, just kind of rounding up stories from the day. And there was also a Friday night kind of entertainment football show that I used to work on as well. And yeah, it was deep, man. And I ended up staying there for, like I say, in that role for 2.5 years.
I mean, what were the main things that you found that professionally you developed the most?
So I think it was only when I left the BBC that I realised how much it was crushing me. So although I had good times there, although I enjoyed working there, although I had great experiences there, it wasn't an easy space to be in. And it wasn't an easy space to be in as a black man in that space. I worked there for nearly 11 years, all in. I was usually the only black person in the room. I was usually the only person from a working class background in the room. And it's not easy to be in a space, it's not easy for me to be in a space where I don't feel comfortable. And to kind of have a decade-long career there was actually a struggle for me. I can't talk for other people, but I know for me, but it's only really when I left that I realised that. And it was only really because when I went to Abu Dhabi that I realised that. And when I went to Abu Dhabi, I was suddenly in a space, work-wise and also society-wise, that was intrinsically mixed. Our boss, the boss of our whole operation, was a black man from London. I'd never had a black boss before. And he ran the team. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he's come back to the UK and he's never had a role at that level in the UK, because you're dealing with a kind of different, it's a different society, it's a different space. And for me, I felt more comfortable in a working environment and in a social environment than I did here. So it might sound slightly weird for people who maybe haven't experienced it, but that's what I felt. And I know there's lots of other people from similar backgrounds to myself, black people out there who are, again, much more comfortable there than they are here. Now, obviously, we all know that there are issues with the society there, but there are also issues with the society here. And I think this is probably not the space, because it's probably a too big a space to talk about it here. But I think that when you have a different societal experience in the UK to maybe what the norm is, and then you go there, you will also experience it differently again. So, like I say, for me as a black man out there, not just for me, there's lots of black people out there. It's a space that I was actually able to come into my own. It was a space that I felt valued in. It was a space that probably for the first time, people really valued me professionally. And like I say, when I moved on to other companies, it was the same thing. You know, I moved on to other companies and built and developed things I would never have had the opportunity to do. You know, like within 6 months when I went to Abu Dhabi Sports, I went from AP to producer to show producer. That would never happen. That journey is a decade at the BBC and happened within 6 months.
For, let's say, early career journalists that are from diverse backgrounds or have a working class background and they are feeling similar sort of, they're getting a similar sort of sentiment working in the media at the moment, what's your number one piece of advice for them?
I think make the most of every opportunity you've got. I think if you're in a big organisation like a BBC, the great thing about the BBC and organisations like that is the opportunity it affords you to do different things. So always take advantage of that. I think, you know, when I was at the BBC, I did television, I did local news, I did national news, I did radio, I did programme development, I did sport television, I did sport online, I did sports news, I did red button content, I directed stuff, I produced, I shot, I edited. I did so many different things. So I think really the thing is to build yourself, build your skills, build your knowledge, make sure you do your time. Because again, I was able to go to the Middle East because in reality, they look at a CV, they see BBC and they go, oh, this guy must be good because I was at the BBC. Am I any good? Maybe not. But it says BBC, right? People believe that. So I think if you're at a big organisation, a big company, make sure you do your time to have that weight on your CV.
Yeah.
Because it will open doors. But also make sure that you're building yourself, your career, and also more importantly, your network. Because that's the key thing.
Network is your net worth.
100%.
Now with that, I'd like to open up the conversation to our producers so we can take a little second to break. But they've got a couple of questions for you that they've compiled over the course of our conversation.
My name's Ifyok. I'm a producer on this episode. My question is, for aspiring journalists whose goals might be to be on the big television companies like the BBC or the Sky Sports, ITV, etc., do you then think it's worth doing time at other industries that are smaller production companies, rather than just trying to beamline straight to the top?
Yeah, I think wherever you can get your experience is the place to go. So I think a lot of people focus on a BBC, a Sky and ITV. It's fantastic to work at places like that. But I think the smaller companies give you more opportunity. So I think if you're at a BBC or a Sky, you're going to have a role and you're probably going to be quite tightly pigeonholed. Whereas if you're at a smaller company, you're going to do more things. They're going to be, they're going to be nimbler. They're going to be slightly looser, more startup kind of style. And I think everywhere that you can be, you're going to learn. So if you're able to execute an idea, your idea might be, Hollywood. You might have champagne idea, lemonade money. But if you make it on lemonade money and the lemonade tastes good, then you might get the champagne money down the line. So I think always take the opportunity to create, push your ideas forward, make them happen, and that will open doors going forward.
Hi, my name's Tamina. I'm also a producer on this episode. My question is, you were saying a lot about, fate and luck, but we were also speaking to a lot of journalists during JournoFest, and they were saying there was a lot of mixed of do everything, that opportunity you get, and also be very picky and kind of choose what you want to get in. What would you suggest is the best advice to give aspiring journalists? And also, if it is to just choose, how do you choose what is best for you?
I think it's a combination of both. I don't think you can be in a position, particularly at the beginning of your career, where you can choose. I think if you have the luxury to choose at the beginning of your career, fantastic. Most people don't have that. So I think you have to take the opportunity where it comes. So your dream or your desire might be to be a radio presenter. And your first opportunity might be social media. So that might not be what you want to do, but it gives you the opportunity to get a foot in the door, to learn, to prove yourself. And in reality, nowadays, everyone kind of has to be able to do everything. And when I say nowadays, even in my day, when I began 25 years ago, the reality was, it was a multidisciplinary world then. It's even more so now. So if you can write, if you can present, if you can film, if you can do a podcast, if you can edit, all of these skills are important. So I would say, really, particularly at the beginning of your career, I would say kind of do anything you can to get in, to learn, to connect, to build that network. And then it will probably take you a couple of years to then start to specialize, because hopefully in a couple of years' time, you'll have a little bit more idea of what the different roles are and what the different areas are. And then you might go, I really like gallery, or I really like editing. And then you can focus and try and push down a particular pathway. So I would say it's a little bit of both. I would say early doors, just do whatever you can. And then once you get a bit more understanding, then you can focus and really have a focus on doing that going forward.
So now we very much are entering the final part of the podcast, which is the quick fire round. So I call it fast and furious. Say the first thing that comes to mind. And sometimes these questions can trip you up. So number one is, are you an extrovert or are you an introvert?
Introvert, 100%.
Fantastic. Okay, keep going. Night owl or early riser?
Neither. Well, night owl. I'm a night owl. Did you say night owl or night out?
Night owl.
Oh, night owl.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Night owl, yeah, of course. Favorite sporting event you've ever been to?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Difficult.
Do I have to have one answer? So, all right, I would say in terms of an event that I really enjoyed working on, Wimbledon. Love Wimbledon as an event. But the best event I've ever been to, I went to the World Cup 2014 in Brazil as a fan. And that's the best thing I've ever done.
Samba.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's the home of football. Like, people say England's the home of football, maybe. But I would say Brazil's the heart of football.
Yeah.
You know, and being at that World Cup, I was there for 2 friends, so 3 of us. We were there for 5 weeks, from the opening match all the way through to after the final. So, yeah, man, it was beautiful.
Favorite concert you've ever been to? Music.
Favorite concert I've ever been to? All right, the favorite concert I've ever been to, and I know the answer to this. Like I say, I'm a big hip-hop fan. The favorite concert I've ever been to was Talib Kweli Mos Def at Jazz Cafe. It was promoted only as a Talib Kweli show. And then when we got there, on the tickets it said Beat Nuts. Obviously I'm going old school now. Beat Nuts. I was like, okay, cool, that's nice. But then, literally, and this is not a lie, Talib Kweli came out on stage and Mos Def jumped out the crowd. I don't know how he was at the front of the crowd, but he jumped out the crowd on stage. And then it was a double header, all the way. And it was the best show I've ever been to.
When was this?
This was a while ago still. This was maybe like noughties, late noughties.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've been Jazz Cafe, but it's intimate, small. Like the vibes was immaculate. And obviously once Mos Def come out, literally out the front of the crowd, and it was then a double header.
Favorite album of all time?
Group of all time is A Tribe Called Quest. My favorite Tribe Called Quest album is Midnight Marauders, their 3rd album. So I would say that's my favorite album. If you haven't heard Midnight Marauders by Tribe Called Quest, listen to it front to back.
And then final question is, one word to describe your career as of right now.
One word only. Eclectic.
And with that, Drew, thank you very much for coming on to the How to Be a Journalist podcast. I've had a brilliant time hearing about your story from the beginning to the end, the different sides of the industry that you've worked in, and it's been a really, really fun listen. And I love that we got to talk about hip-hop as well, but we'll talk more about it off camera.
Yeah.
But with that, I've been Plamedi Mbungu, and this has been How to Be a Journalist.